All right, let's dive in. Today we're going to tackle one of the most challenging ideas in the Old Testament, God as a warrior. It's a complex and honestly, sometimes a shocking idea. And to help us unpack it all, we'll be using the work of scholar Dr. Tremper Longman as our guide.
So let me just ask you straight up. Is God a warrior? I mean, when you close your eyes and picture God, is a fighter the first thing that comes to mind? For most of us, probably not. And what's really interesting is that's kind of where the Bible starts too.
You know, unlike so many other ancient creation stories that are all about these epic cosmic battles, Genesis kicks off with, well, peace. God isn't wrestling sea monsters into submission. No, he's more like a master artist or a sculptor, just speaking a beautiful, orderly world into existence. The whole vibe is way more artist than general.
But then, Genesis 3 happens. The serpent shows up, sin enters the picture, and disobedience throws this perfect harmony into chaos. And this huge shift, this fundamental problem, it demands a totally new kind of response from God. And it's right here, in the immediate aftermath of that moment, that we catch our very first glimpse of God starting to take on this warrior-like role. To block the way back to the tree of life, God stations these powerful angelic beings called cherubim. Dr. Longman has this great description for them. He calls them the SEAL Team 6 of God's heavenly army. So this isn't a suggestion, right? This is an act of divine enforcement.
The hints keep getting stronger, but it's not until this moment, way later in the book of Exodus, that the text just comes right out and says it. Right after that unbelievable victory over the entire Egyptian army at the Red Sea, boom, it declares it, plain as day. The Lord is a warrior. Super explicit.
So this leads us right into what Dr. Longman calls Phase 1. And this is probably the idea we're all most familiar with. God fighting for his people, acting as their ultimate champion.
And you see this pattern just all over the Old Testament. I mean, whether it's Abraham rescuing his nephew, or Joshua leading the conquest, or even with kind of flawed leaders like the judges and King David, the story's always the same. God is the one who secures the victory for Israel, a lot of times against absolutely impossible odds.
And the text is always so careful to show you who the real hero of the story is. Take that famous battle where the sun supposedly stood still. The story goes out of its way to point out that God's hailstones actually killed more of the enemy than Israel's swords did. God is literally using nature itself as a weapon. And this really gets to the core message of Phase 1. You see this phrase, or something like it, again and again and again. After one leader, Ehud, defeats the Moabites, he shouts, "The Lord has given your enemy into your hands." The credit always goes to God. Okay, so the pattern seems pretty simple, right? Israel obeys, God fights for them, they win. But what happens when the very people who are supposed to be God's representatives on earth start breaking the rules? Well, this is where the story takes a really sharp, really difficult turn. And that brings us to Phase 2, which is the really mind-bending part of this whole story. God fighting against his own people. All of a sudden, the winning streak is over. Right after the miracle at Jericho, Israel gets completely routed by the tiny city of Ai, all because one guy decided to keep some forbidden loot. Later, the Ark of the Covenant itself, God's throne on earth, is captured by the enemy. And this all leads to the most crushing defeat imaginable, the total destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. The story is clear. These aren't just losses because God is weak. They're happening because God is now actively fighting against them. And this isn't just me reading between the lines. The Bible is brutally honest about it. The book of Lamentations, which was written right after Jerusalem fell, it literally describes God acting like an enemy soldier, like an enemy he has strung his bow. It's just a gut-wrenching, shocking reversal. So, what gives? How can both of these things be true? How can God be Israel's greatest champion and its fiercest foe? The key, the thing that unlocks this whole puzzle, is something called the covenant.
Now, when we say covenant, don't think of it as just some vague, fuzzy promise. Think of it more like a formal, binding treaty, like an agreement between a powerful king and his people. And this treaty had very clear terms and conditions: blessings if you follow the rules, and curses if you break them. And if you read the fine print of this treaty, laid out right there in the book of Deuteronomy, it spells out both possibilities. It's a massive if-then clause. If you obey, then the Lord will make sure your enemies are defeated. But if you disobey, then the Lord will cause you to be defeated by your enemies. You see?
So God isn't being random or erratic. He's just consistently upholding both sides of the deal he made.
And this is such a great way to understand what the prophets were doing. Guys like Jeremiah weren't just fortune tellers, they were more like covenant lawyers. They were sent by God to present his case against Israel, pointing out all the ways they were breaking the treaty and warning them that the curses, the consequences, were coming.
So, where does that leave us? What's the big takeaway from this complicated, two-sided picture of a warrior God? Well, it pushes us way beyond simple tribalism or nationalism.
Here's the bottom line. God's primary allegiance isn't to a flag or to a specific group of people. His allegiance is to justice, to righteousness, to the terms of his own divine agreement. He fights for the covenant, and it doesn't matter if that means defending Israel or judging it.
There's this incredible moment in the book of Joshua that just nails this point. Right before the big battle of Jericho, Joshua meets the commander of the Lord's army, and he asks the most logical question in the world. Are you on our side or their side? And the answer is just no. Not us, not them. The commander isn't there to take Israel's side. He's there to take command. God's army plays by God's rules, period.
And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If God is a warrior whose ultimate loyalty is to a divine standard of justice and not to any one nation, how does that challenge and maybe reshape our own ideas about justice and loyalty and how God acts in the world today? It's definitely something to think about.